Hey everyone, Xyronic here. Welcome to Team Liquid's boss strategy guide powered by Alienware. Be sure to check out tl.gg/alienware to see what the guild uses to raid, and keep an eye out for some awesome gear giveaways during the race. Hey guys, today we'll be going over the Heroic Crown of the Cosmos boss, the final boss of the Voidspire. This boss is a little more difficult than the other bosses that we've already gone through in this raid, so it'll be a little more in-depth than the previous ones, and we also don't have an official Liquid VOD for this one, so I'll be using my own personal kill from earlier last week. But it should suffice for the purposes of just showing you guys how to deal with the individual mechanics on this boss. So to start off with, 3 Voidlord adds at the start of the fight. We're going to be dealing with Demiar here, and the positioning is important to make this phase as easy as possible. You'll notice that we're all stacked up right on the edge of the platform here. We're going to be moving around the edge of the platform at the start of the phase here until we get to the second Voidlord up in the corner. And then once we do that, we'll have plenty of room to deal with the final Voidlord add. So starting off with Demiar here. Basic idea, we're killing this guy first because he does an AoE interrupt cast that'll silence people for 4 seconds if they're still casting when it goes off. Really annoying mechanic to deal with, so you want to make sure that you get rid of him as quickly as possible. First other mechanic of the fight are going to be these obelisks that you see here. It's a pretty simple mechanic to deal with in this phase. You want to move away from the center of it, and once you've moved away, you'll point 3 beams from your position, 1 directly through the center of the circle, and then 2 more along the edges. As long as you're facing these away from people and you're not shuffling around so you change the position of these arrows, you should be totally fine to just point them in whichever direction in this phase. You just need to make sure your raid is paying attention to you and not getting hit by those beams. At the same time, these void droplets are spawning throughout this phase. These are incredibly important to dealing with this phase as quickly as possible. When the void droplets die, they leave a small blue puddle on the ground, and anything that's hit by that blue puddle will take 30% increased damage. This debuff stacks up. It's really important to make sure that you're killing as many of the void droplets on top of the void lords as possible, because they will die incredibly quickly the more debuffs you get. Another mechanic that's going to be happening throughout phase 1 as well as phase 2 are these void expulsions. These are another pretty unique mechanic to the fight and how it works. So the reason we're stacked on the edge of the room is because one of the void expulsions is randomly baited on one of the members in your raid. So if one person's standing in the middle of the room and they get chosen for that mechanic, it's going to leave a void zone there that'll expand and give you a lot less room to work with. So stacking on the edge of the room is really important for this phase. Now, at the same time the random one goes out, 2 other players in your raid will get targeted by a debuff. You can see Eric here had one of them. He went to the edge of the room, dropped the debuff off. Good bait. Another one was baited here. Not the greatest bait, but it'll work for phase 1. It's totally okay. Now, the other important mechanic of this phase that we haven't covered yet is the Silver Strike arrow mechanic here. These silver beams coming from the boss. Now, all 3 of the Void Lords spawn with a void shield around their character. It makes them unable to die. They will stay at 1 HP until you've removed that debuff from the enemies. This happens as well with the adds in phase 2, so it's really important for the rest of the fight to deal with this mechanic the best way possible. So 2 players will get targeted by this beam, and all you have to do is hit the Void Lord ad with the beam. Now, this will remove all debuffs on the target that are applied in the fight. Not necessarily like dots from players, but debuffs applied by the fight. So it'll remove the Void Shield, but it'll also remove the damage increase taken debuff from the Void Droplets. So you really only want to hit the Void Lords with this Silver Strike arrow 1 time to remove the Void Shield. Once you've done that, you can kill the ad and you've done your job with that mechanic. So you can see we have a player hit this ad here. We also have a player go to Morium, I believe, the second ad that we're going to be killing on the far right here. Break those Void Shields and move on with the fight. We've killed off Demiar here and are starting to move on to Vorius, the second ad that we're killing here. This one does an AoE circle around him periodically and also teleports around. There's that AoE circle right now, makes your melee's life a little more difficult. Now, an extra important mechanic with these Silver Strike arrows, because it removes the damage taken increased debuff on the ads. Once you've broken that Void Shield on the Void Lords, you do not want to hit it again with the Silver Strike arrow. So you can see one of our players moving away from the raid with that Silver Strike arrow to make sure they're not hitting the rest of the raiders with that damage from the boss. And of course, we have a third player going off to that last Void ad in the top left corner here to try to break that shield. I believe they missed there, unfortunately. Yeah, you can still see the Void Shield, but we're not killing that ad yet. We can hit it with the next Silver Strike arrow in 10 seconds. It's not that big of a deal. Similar to before though, trying to kill the Void Droplets on top of the Void ad, make it take increased damage. You can see once that debuff starts stacking up, you really kill these ads incredibly quickly. So it's pretty easy to get through this fight once you've dealt with the ads properly. Of course, once that head goes off, we break the Void Shield on the final Void Lord, get all the Void droplets over to it, AoE them down, which does increase your damage on the ad, and get through this phase incredibly cleanly. Really, this is just all about space management, right? Making sure you don't drop Void Zones in the wrong place, so we have plenty of room to work with here. Again, we already have broken the Void Shield, so neither of these Silver Strike arrows needs to hit the ad. We're just trying to apply that damage tick and debuff to this ad as quickly as possible to get through this phase as quickly as possible. That's pretty much it for phase 1. It's into Intermission 1. On normal, you can get hit by every single one of these Silver Strike arrows to remove this stacking movement speed reduction here. On Heroic, you can only get hit by every other one. This 8-second debuff here will increase the damage you're taken by Silver Strike arrow by a ton, so you don't want to get hit by 2 in a row. But this is just staying away from the boss. The boss takes 99% reduced damage here. You don't want to hit the boss here at all. Don't try to greet anything. Just make sure you don't get sucked into the boss. Pretty easy phase, 20 seconds long. A little bit of RP, let you get your cooldowns back for phase 2, which is probably the hardest phase of the fight, and one of the phases that more people had a problem with for anyone. So I'll try to get as in-depth as possible with our positioning here, and this should help a lot with getting through this phase for most people. So again, similar to phase 1, the idea is you kind of stack your entire raid group as close to the edge here as possible, right? And we're going to be moving slowly around the edge of the room as we drop these Void Zone debuffs off. As long as you're dropping Void Zones in the right place, it makes this phase incredibly easy to deal with. People need to be aware of their positioning at all times in this phase. Starting with Illyria on the edge in the Rift Simulacrum ad in the middle of the room. This is important for a later mechanic. We'll get to that in a little bit. And the other mechanic of this phase, throughout the entire phase, you have these Void Spawn ads spawning all around the room. Now, DK is very valuable here. Bad spawns need to be gripped in. Closer ads can just be silenced and interrupted in. That's an ideal situation. This is a pretty easy spawn for us. And ideally, you're just gripping these on top of Illyria, AoEing them down, making sure as few Void Barrages go off as possible. Also in phase 1, just like I was talking about before, this Void Expulsion, same thing. Random spawn, and then 2 player spawns. So you want to make sure pretty much your entire raid minus the tank tanking whichever ad is in the middle of the room, your entire raid needs to be on the edge of the room. So actually great spawns here for us. Good baits as well from the people that stacked them up there. Give us plenty of room to deal with. And similar to the ads in phase 1, these Void spawns will stay at 1 HP unless you hit them with a particular mechanic. In this phase, instead of Silver Strike Arrow, it's Ranger Captain's Mark, but it does essentially the same thing. However, it works slightly differently. I don't think I have a great POV of it here. You can kind of see it. Instead of targeting multiple players from the boss, the way this mechanic works is it'll target 3 players with 1 line. So for instance, for this mechanic, from the boss, it's like going to this player, then going back to this player, and then I think there's a 3rd player in here. And the idea is all 3 of these beams can hit 1 ad, and you need to spread the beams out so that each player is breaking one of the ads so that they can be killed off. So let's keep playing it here. I believe we break 2 of the ads here. There's 1 Undying Void spawn in the middle of the room that doesn't get hit by the Ranger Captain's Mark. Actually, they did hit it. That's pretty impressive. And we've dealt with those ads pretty quickly. One of the hardest parts of this fight is if you don't clear one of the ads and it just stays alive casting extra barrages. That's extra healing that your healers have to deal with for the entire phase, which when stacked up with the Void Expulsion damage on top of the shield pulsing from the Rift Simulacrum can add up to quite a lot of damage taken in this phase. The other mechanic I didn't cover just happened for us here. The Rift Simulacrum will get a large shield on itself, and it will start pulsing for a large amount of AoE damage on the raid, which, when stacked up with the Void Expulsions, when stacked up with the debuff that's being dispelled around to multiple different players, and if there's any Void Barrage damage going off, can pretty easily wipe your raid. So the tank swap here is essentially 2 times every shield from the Rift Simulacrum. You start with the Rift Simulacrum in the center of the room in the phase. When it's about to cast its shield, you swap, and your tanks can just taunt, and these mobs move very quickly when they're taunted. Simulacrum to the edge, you break the shield. When the shield's broken, you can swap back to the middle. And then when the shield's about to happen again, you swap back to the edge. And the DPS players stay on the edge the entire phase. You're just hitting whichever mob is on the edge of the platform the entire phase. Ranger Captain mark goes out again. There's nothing to hit with it, so you just get out of the raid. Now, the other thing about the Ranger Captain's mark is it can be used to dispel the Voidstalker sting that goes out in this phase. This is a dot that's placed on random members of the raid. Again, lots of passive rot damage in this phase that healers have to deal with. Anytime you can remove that debuff with the Light Captain array, it's really important to deal with that as quickly as possible, just to remove any extra damage. But from this point on, it's essentially rinse and repeat, right? We dealt with the shield, Rift Simulacrum back to the center, Illyria to the edge, deal with ad spawns. We have an Undying Void spawn here in the goop, quickly interrupted and gripped in so that we don't have to worry about melee not having uptime on it. Good Void Expulsion baits here on the edge of the old goop, giving us as much room as possible to deal with. Shield goes up on the Rift Simulacrum, re-tank swap to get that shield back to the edge so all of our DPS can have uptime on it as quickly as possible. And the rest of the phase is essentially more of the same, just making sure that you're dealing with shields quickly, killing ads off quickly. We missed a Void spawn here with the Ranger Captain's mark, unfortunately, but we're CCing it nice and clean to make sure it doesn't actually accidentally do too much raid damage to us, and pretty easily dealt with. Now, a couple extra caveats in this phase to deal with. So Illyria and the Void spawn, Illyria and the Simulacrum, they share HP pools in this phase. So there's not a whole lot of cheese you can do here to get extra boss damage out. You'll always enter last phase at like 60, 61%. You can maybe do a little bit of extra boss damage as she transitions into the second intermission. There's a little bit of extra cheese you can do at the end of the phase. Like if your Simulacrum casts a shield at 2% HP, instead of hitting that shield, you can just have everyone target Illyria Windrunner, which will do real damage to the Simulacrum and it'll kill the ad off and you can go into the second intermission. There's one final extra thing in this phase that causes a little bit of extra damage. When you go through this crack, it applies a little bit of damage to everyone. So you need to make sure that when you swap platforms here, you are in a situation where you're not taking extra damage. So you need to make sure there's no shield on the Simulacrum. You need to make sure there's not any Void spawns casting on the group. You need to make sure you have raid cooldowns prepared just to deal with that swap over. This debuff can do a lot of damage when stacked up with all the extra damage in the phase. But other than that, rinse and repeat, deal with the ads, deal with the shield, make sure you're clearing your debuffs as much as possible with the Ranger Captain's mark, and you should be good to go for the second intermission. Now on Heroic, it's quite a bit different in the second intermission. You'll see there's a lot of void balls here that you have to dodge, and you're kind of forced to move as a group. But other than that, it's similar to the first intermission, right? Make sure you get hit by every other Silver Strike Barrage just to remove that move speed reduction debuff from your player so that you can move together as a group. And whenever the phase ends, you want to make sure you're all in the same part of the platform so that you can start together in the final phase together as a group. We've identified as a group that is kind of better to be close to the far edge of Void Orbs. As long as everyone's on the same page with where you're going to end in this phase, it's totally okay. But for our purposes, we chose this platform, so everyone's going to get over here. It's important that you are actually on the platform. If you're in between the platforms, you can just fall to your death in the cracks here, so make sure that doesn't happen to you. Maybe call for a grip if you're in a bad situation, or play a Dracthyr, like me. But here we go, final phase of the fight. This is just a pure DPS race to the end here. Bloodlust is saved for this portion of the fight. And if you're able to get to this part of the fight with every player alive, it's actually pretty easy. There's only two mechanics that you really have to deal with in this phase. Number one, aspect of the end. So the way this mechanic works, 3 players in a raid get targeted by essentially a tether, a beam that you have to break. It's 1 tank and 2 non-tanks. And the way that we and other guilds have identified of dealing with this with the best is the 2 non-tanks instantly break as quickly as possible. So you'll see, bam, dash out from the Demon Hunter, dash out from the other Demon Hunter, break. And then your tank can hold on to it until everyone's topped off and then break theirs. At the same time, the obelisks from phase 1 are back. And while these can be annoying to deal with if you're not moving together as a group, the best way we've identified to deal with this mechanic is just everyone moves together. And this kind of solves the mechanic on its own. You see, we have a ping placed on the platform and the entire raid is going to move in that direction. And what that will do is it'll make it so the beams will all face this way, away from the raid. So you really don't have to think about the obelisks at all as a mechanic. It's quite nice. So you can see, I'll play it here in just a moment. We have a ping down that everyone's going to move to. All the beams point the other direction. Nobody's ever in danger of getting hit. A second set of heralds go out. We just move that another direction again. All the beams go behind us, and we're ready for the next aspect of the end. It's very simple, very rinse and repeat. And the only real thing that I would say is the important min-max here is not moving too much for every single set of mechanics, and making sure at the end of a phase, whenever the boss casts Devouring Cosmos and deals with the platform, destroys the platform you're on, you want to be near an edge so that you can get to the next platform as quickly as possible. Again, another aspect at the end, DPS healers break instantly. Even at the same time is fine, you should have cooldowns allocated for this. Tank holds onto theirs until the last second, breaks it when people are healthy. Obelisks come out, everyone moves together. You can gateway across this edge, but the normal way is just grabbing one of these feathers on the ground. You can see one here, and jumping across. You can use any movement to get across as well. Pretty much any movement except for blink. Blink just will not take you anywhere. And it's, again, rinse and repeat to the end. It's a DPS race to the finish here. Bloodlust on the first platform, you should get the boss to maybe 32%. And if you're on that pace, it should be pretty easy to kill. Again, pretty much all of this phase is movement for us. We've kind of identified the way we want to move through this phase. It's kind of a pattern sort of like this. So like at the start of phase 3, you'll start near the middle of the room. You'll move towards this corner that we're heading to right now. And then once we're in this corner, it's kind of the same that it was back in phase 2, right? You'll move kind of along the edge of the platform here. Aspects of the end of the middle here. Again, non-tanks break as quickly as possible. Tank holds on until people are healthy, then breaks theirs. Herald obelisks go out. Everyone moves together. A little bit of a weird bait here from one of our players, so that's something that can go wrong. If players are in the wrong place, you can get kind of weird arrow baits. So, a little unfortunate, but as long as people are aware that the arrow's there and this player isn't jiggling around changing the position of that arrows, you can play around this. Just gotta be aware of players' positioning here. And again, like I said, it's a pretty tight DPS race here. We had a lot of pulls on this boss in our splits where even if we got to the last phase with just one player dead, the DPS check would be very tight, or we wouldn't hit it sometimes. It's kind of a matter of staying alive, making sure you have everyone alive going to the last phase. Other than that, pretty clean fight. Hope this helps you guys out. If you have any questions in the comments, I'll be looking at that to help you guys out with those. And thanks for watching.